Hello viewers, and welcome back to our webcast studio. We have been on a summer break, but are happy to be back for another term of webcasts. If you were watching the intro footage, or footage is the wrong term, it's a capture render, then we thank Jost for submitting this to us. Our showcase reward program is still technically open, I suppose, but of course there are no showcases to submit unless, of course, you have some great material lying around from before the pandemic. Then you're welcome to send it to us. We are likely going to be reworking the concept of the showcase reward program slightly to be accepting virtual events or events that didn't happen, or as in this case, imagined designs. So tonight I've prepared a special on snapshots, videos, and renders, but it's also an open Q&A session. This means you're welcome to write your questions to us. Just enter them in the live chat, which should be right below the video here on YouTube, and my colleague will assist me in bringing the questions to the screen next to me here so that I can answer them for you. Of course, if you stick to questions in English, that will help us. I don't know if we're able to run auto-translate at this point, or whether the auto-translate will even make sense of your questions, but we will do our best. I'm going to start with the talk on the snapshots and the videos. If you have questions about that, then just ask and we'll try to cover that right away. Otherwise, I imagine that the open Q&A session will be right after the snapshot stuff here in the beginning. So I'm going to go straight to this bit here. So if we could switch over to the computer view here. I've got Capture running here in a familiar design, which I'm sure we will be changing any day soon. And what I want to talk to you about is what lives down here in the Snapshots tab. I want to talk about what we can do with snapshots, what you can't do, and also a little bit about the history behind them, as that may help you understand how some things work here. Let's start with an example just to make sense of what's going on here. So snapshots record things like DMX, and I'm running a console next to me here so that I can actually bring up a few looks that we might be interested in recording. So as an example, I'm going to start with recording a still snapshot Let's call this, I think this is the red cue. Let's play back another cue on the console, which I think is the yellow cue. So let's record a still here. Let's call that yellow. So what's happened now is that Capture has recorded the DMX from the console. We have not taken screenshots. We have recorded the actual DMX. This means that if I were to disconnect the lighting console, I'm just going to release the cue list here. So if I disconnect the console, if I'm on the road or am running Capture on another computer, I now have access to these two snapshots that I can play back. And when I'm playing back a snapshot, it's effectively overriding any incoming DMX from the console. So if I were to start playing back cues now, I wouldn't see anything because now I'm playing back from within Capture. Now, one great use of snapshots, apart from simply being able to recall looks when you are on the go or don't have the console, is in presentations. So let's export a presentation. I'll just place it on the desktop. I'll call it presentation A. We'll take down Capture. I will extract the presentation and run it. Yes, we know. So now you can see that within the Capture presentation, there is a pane that appears in the bottom, which lists the snapshots in the design. So if you're sending the presentation to someone, they can now also play back the snapshots that you have recorded. So you can use this not only for yourself, but also for someone else that you are sending your presentation to. And finally, although I can't show that here, you could also now be opening this project file in the Capture mobile app on iPad or iPhone and play back these snapshots in the mobile app on the go as well. But so far I have only recorded still snapshots, but there is also another option called movie snapshots. Now a little bit of background here. In the beginning of times, it's not that long ago, let's say 10 years ago, computers were a lot less powerful, and it was not realistic maybe to visualize on screen a larger design with a lot of lights. You would get poor frame rate, low quality, or whatever. So something that is common today is simply recording the screen of your design to send that to someone or share on social media. That was not an attractive option some years ago because the quality on screen wasn't good enough. So what you wanted to do in effect was record the incoming data. So I'm going to record here now, a few seconds. You could hit stop. Now I'm going to clear the playbacks. And please, you can start asking questions for the open Q&A as well, that I'll get to once I'm done with this segment here. So now we have a 3-second movie snapshot that I can play back. Now what's more, I could also right-click here, given that it's not playing back at the moment. I can right-click here and render it out to an MP4 file. And I'm given a few options to choose between here. So let's go through the options while we are looking at them. So the first option is which view we are basing the rendering on. And the reason this is important is if you have recorded camera movements as part of the snapshot, so if you have patched the Capture camera to DMX, and you've made camera transitions as part of the console programming, then that is tied to a specific camera. And by basing it on a specific view, you have the option of choosing, in a sense, which camera recording you are working on. Actually, no, sorry, actually, I'm confused now. It's not that you're choosing the camera, but you're choosing the settings of the view in terms of things like, let's go back to views here. So in terms of things like the ambient lighting setting and these things that are not DMX controlled, these are view specific, makes it important for you to choose which view you are using when you are rendering the movie. Movie A. Second, you have a choice of pixel resolution of the movie you are rendering. The higher the resolution, the longer it will take to render, of course. And finally, there is a bitrate option, which basically controls how heavily compressed the resulting MP4 file will be. The higher bitrate, the higher quality, the larger file. And to some extent, because the compression takes some CPU power, it might actually render faster in the ultra setting, but I don't think it has a great effect on rendering speed, but you could notice it. If you really want to render out the highest possible quality and you have access to software such as DaVinci Resolve or other video editing software, then you can also render out to EXR. This renders a single frame per file, so you actually end up with a lot of files when you use this option. But you get full 16-bit resolution per color channel in wide color, which means that in an editing software, you could do more things with it, such as control exposure manually. Now, I did mention that movie snapshots originally came about because of low computer power and the need to render offline, because taking a screen capture didn't work well. These days, the situation is a little bit different. It's actually the other way around. Today, the computers are very powerful, and we could in fact be rendering at 60 frames per second on the computer. But now we want to render out something where each individual frame has a higher, crisper quality to it. And that is primarily the reason we would be using movie snapshots and rendering them out these days. But here it's important to keep one thing in mind, and that is that the MP4 files that Capture is rendering out are 25 frames per second, whereas you might have a 60 frame per second experience on screen. So if you are doing very fast effects, or if you are strobing by DMX rather than using a strobe channel, then there are some effects that might actually get lost when you render out a movie file. This is something we are going to tackle in the future by allowing you to render out higher FPS movie files. But at the moment, it's important to be aware of this, I guess, limitation. Here, and I'm going to switch the video out in the background, I'm running the NDI signal generator here. I'm going to switch to the panning line pattern. So if you see the backdrop here on stage, excuse me, there's a bit of video running that's panning a line back and forth. Now, when you record a movie, there is an option here called media frame rate, and this has caused a bit of confusion. It says 15 FPS, and people have wondered, well, what actually ends up being 15 FPS? Well, because Capture renders out the resulting movie in 25 FPS, the DMX is still captured at 25 FPS regardless. However, incoming media content, such as streaming video or even video played back locally or laser streams, they are recorded in this frame rate. So if you record them with a media frame rate of 2 frames per second, it means that any video panels will update twice per second as part of the snapshot. Now you might ask, why on earth would there then be lower settings than 25 FPS? Well, Capture needs to record these at really high speed, so it doesn't spend a lot of time on compressing them. So the resulting snapshots can be quite large. If you're running 4K video streams into Capture and you want to record that at 25 FPS, then basically Capture has to encode 4K streams live. It can't do that. And then you might have to force the media frame rate setting to a lower one in order to give Capture a chance to even deal with the incoming video. I'm going to do an example here with the 2 FPS one, just to show you what it looks like. So let's record a few seconds here. So here is now my new snapshot, and I'm going to release my playbacks. Now if I play back, now I'm playing back the snapshot that I just recorded with the 2 FPS media frame rate. Now as you can see, the fixture's tilt effect is still functioning correctly, but the video in the background is choppy. It's stepping. It's only got 2 frames per second, in fact. So there are many things we want to do here with Capture in the future in terms of improving all this, but I think it's good to have a chance to explain to you how it works today, why it does that, so that you can make the most out of it as it is today. So this pretty much sums up what I wanted to say about snapshots, movies, videos. I don't know, let's see if you had any questions about these specific things. It would seem not. So now we will be transitioning into the open Q&A session. So if you have any questions whatsoever about Capture, then feel free to type them in the live chat below here, somewhere around there, and I will try to answer them. I'll switch over to the wireframe here. I imagine I might be able maybe to show you something. Let's see. Graham Hicks is asking, excuse me. Graham Hicks is asking, can we please have basic animated humans or the ability to import them from other software such as Blender? So the human characters in Capture have been subject to a fair amount of debate and discussion, and there's a million opinions about them. We have users asking for more realistic characters. We have users asking for less realistic characters. Pretty much anything you could think of. And the latest craze, of course, is animated characters, as is seen in some of our competitor softwares. In fact, I do remember asking people a few years ago whether this would be an important feature, and everyone said, no, that's crazy, that's just not necessary. But now that someone has it, then of course everyone needs to have it. The fact is that when we released Capture 2020, it included Gltf support, and Gltf is one of the formats that allows for exchange of animated 3D assets. So we have a good possibility to extend or build on that to support importing animated assets. So if we do it, it will most likely be through import of Gltf files. It's quite unlikely that we would deliver our own animated characters because, frankly, whatever we deliver, most of you will not like it and ask for something else anyway. So we will have something very basic in Capture and encourage people to go on the internet and find something that appeals to them, that adds to their design, and that makes their images look unique. Because frankly, we can often tell by looking at renders from our competitors which software has been used simply based on the fact that we recognize the characters. Whether they are Russian looking or wooden doll looking, we know instantly where that image came from. So we want to encourage you to spend those 30 minutes that it takes to find something that appeals to you and import that in Capture instead. We'd rather spend our time on making a great lighting design software than something that contains the right characters of your choice. So maybe you noticed I didn't actually answer the question, which was my intention. I don't know if we're going to do this. We're in a good technical position to do that. So if a lot of people email us and ask about this, then it will become a top priority. Moving on to Steve Sandlana, who asked us something in Spanish, and we've run it through Translate, so let's hope this makes sense. The question is related to the correct visualization of the Claypaky BI K20 shapes functions in the future. So the Claypaky has a BI fixture that you are all aware of, which has a lot of individually controlled cells in the aperture that has built-in patterns to it. And these patterns can be triggered by DMX to play back various nice things. The truth is that the data about the patterns themselves are not available to us. There are no pictures that document them. There is no data that we can import into the library of the patterns. And there are very many fixtures out there with patterns like this. So at the moment, there is no realistic way of getting the patterns into the library short of very manually pixeling them, which is just not realistic. So we are hoping that we can convince some fixture manufacturers to share this data with us somehow. Unfortunately, GDTF happened, which from this perspective was very counterproductive, because we were, in a sense, finally getting somewhere in terms of getting data like this shared with us, but now, because of GDTF, all of that is on hold, while GDTF is reinventing the wheel on things like pan and tilt instead. So from our point of view, GDTF was actually a setback for things like this. So long story made short, we want to do it, but we need the manufacturers to provide us with the data, and at the moment there is no practical way of doing it. So unfortunately, I don't see this happening the next 2 years, to be perfectly honest. All right, I can see some questions are popping in now, which is great. Moving on to a question from Sebastian, whether it would be possible to create more grouped layer structures in the future. I suppose that means you're asking for more pre-built truss structures in the library. We could absolutely do this. Please email library@capture.sc with what you would like to have pre-built in the library, and we will try and see what we can do about it. Lior is asking whether we will see an update to the distance tool. It's quite not comfortable as it is now. I can absolutely see your point. So just to illustrate a little bit, we have a distance tool in the library that we can drag and drop into the design. It works best in the paper mode, since you can actually see the measurement in paper mode. It snaps to various locations, and you can double click on the ends of the measurements to move them individually and snap them to the places you want to measure. A lot of users haven't found this functionality, so they would be typing in distances in here until they get something that matches, that is of course terrible, truly. You can do that. You can type in a distance here and create a distance measurement. But of course, double clicking on the ends is much more useful. Now, excuse me. A lot of users are asking for something like a quick measurement tool. We are very well aware of that, and all I can say really is that it is on our radar and something we would like to do in the near future. Quantum is asking, in a project with imported models, I animated the camera. I then ran into a situation where I had a 45 FPS according to info, but it still looked jerky. Recording and rendering did not help. So this has become something of a common problem recently, and it's something we are researching. Truth to be told, there are a number of different things that can happen, ranging from, I mean, there are consoles where even though you patch a 16-bit channel, you are in reality, for instance, only getting 13 bits because of limitations in that console. And that might not be obvious if you're running a dimmer crossfade, but in the case of positioning the camera, it's crucial that you are getting the full 16-bit resolution. There are also some performance-related issues in some specific situations, so it's very hard to say what exactly did not work in this case. It is one of the focus areas for Capture 2021 to really do something about this, and I imagine it involves including something that will smoothen out whatever you recorded, so that in case you can't fix the incoming DMX, at least we can polish the result somehow. I hope that helps. I would recommend that maybe you email us more details to support so we can help you out in your specific situation. Quantum is got another question related to known issues with some models, possibly about Gltf. Generally speaking, we have no known bugs with any import formats at all. So if you come across anything, then please email us so that we can take a look at it. Specifically Gltf, I would say, is possibly the one that works absolutely best at the moment. So if you found something there, we would really want to have more details. Ronald is asking, is there any shortcut commands for different fixture groups? No, there is not. It's only possible to access the fixture groups from within the, let's have some lights on at least. It's a lighting software after all. So the only way of accessing the fixture groups is from within the fixture groups tab. There are no keyboard shortcuts. Something that might help you is opening the fixture groups as a floating window to make sure that it is always accessible when you're doing other things. That could be quite useful, especially if you have a second monitor where you could place it. Keyboard shortcuts is something that we are looking into in the future, making more configurable and versatile. Anthony is asking, how is Lars today? Well, that is a question, of course. I'm fine, thank you. I hope you're fine too. I'm coughing a bit because I'm not used to speaking this much, but that's another matter. Sebastian is asking, or correcting and extending his question. No, sorry, I meant to group layers and create a more organized layer structure. We've been asked for layer stuff in the library so many times that I confuse it with Layer from Germany, which is the scaffolding brand. I know a lot of users have asked about the ability to group layers in the layer editor. It is, in fact, so that it is very difficult to deliver that based on anything that is native in Windows, primarily. So we would need to build something quite custom. So we're doing our best to avoid this one and trying to come up with creative solutions that work well, working around grouping layers somehow. But we are very much aware of the fact that it's something that a lot of people are asking for. So it might well happen, I just can't say exactly when or how at the moment. Bas de Vries is asking, is it possible to create a new patch tool where we can add unit number and DMX universe together to a fixture in one mouse click? So generally speaking, anything is possible. It's only a matter of priority. So the more people ask about something, the more prioritized it gets. At the moment, we have, as Bas knows, the sequential tools where you can assign them one at a time, and there is no combined function. But it's a good idea, and if more people ask for that, I could well imagine that we might do that. Senogravando, please excuse my pronunciation, is asking, or stating that the gloss plane works well, thank you, but there is a lack of gloss applied to materials as well as bump mapping. Do you think about creating these possibilities for editing materials? Yes, I would say that it is almost certain that we will have more material properties in the next version of Capture. We already have a PBR model for rendering, so adding more material properties is not far-fetched at all. Anthony Cahill is asking, I've been having a lot of issues using multi-LED fixtures. When I try and use their outputs with fog in the air, why does my frame rate drop even when using 4 fixtures? Well, the fact is that essentially every cell in the aperture that you see is as if it was an individual fixture of its own. So even though technically you're just adding 1 fixture, if that has 20 apertures in front, it is like adding 20 fixtures. And to make matters worse, these fixtures are often used in a way that they are shooting into the camera, which is also the most expensive thing to render. So it's a combination of the fact that they are essentially multiple light sources and the way you are using them. It's something that we're always looking at how we can improve the performance of, but it's an eternal challenge. Oz is asking, hi Lars, hi Oz. May we import the DMX values from a snapshot to record a cue on Evolite's Titan? This is a question that has popped up quite a few times in the recent year and a half. The ability to go from a snapshot in Capture into a lighting console. Capture already has the ability to send some DMX back to the console when you're using the things like the focusing tool or the control pane here in general, but it's tied to the currently selected fixtures. This is a functionality that we're looking into, but we need to synchronize this with the console manufacturers that support TalkBack to make sure that suddenly sending 12 universes of DMX back to the console doesn't cause major issues. So I'd say it's being worked on, but it requires more careful coordination between us and those that support CITP. Wow, the questions. Outdream Creative. Hi Lars, I was wondering if you have any plans on making the video mapping tools more advanced. Mapping complicated video structures is quite difficult, especially when surfaces are curved or rotated. It is on the wish list, we are aware of it. I would say that in Capture 2020 we added the mapping regions. The next obvious thing to do would to add something like curve mapping, but I don't think we will see that in 2021, to be honest. But again, if more ask for it, it gets prioritized. George is asking, can Capture import a Capture Gltf file and extract fixture information? Yeah, that's an interesting question, and in fact we can't. I would say the main reason we can't is that you can already do the same thing if you use import project. So in the import model here in the menu, you can actually import from Capture files. This is a bit fascinating. All right, it says Capture project files, although it has the wrong file ending. Either way, if I have a C2P file, I can import from that. Unfortunately, we don't support importing patch. That is something that's being fixed for Capture 2021. But seeing that there is already another way of importing absolutely anything from another Capture file, going through Gltf at this point seems a bit overworked, especially since there is no other software at the moment that exports Gltf with Capture extensions. Then we have Zachary asking, what's the possibility of mirroring? The possibility of mirroring is positive. It's actually something we're working on for 2021. I can't say much more than that, except ask that you are patient. So we are approaching slowly-ish the end of the live stream, so we will not have room for a lot of more questions, so it's pretty much last chances now. Lior is asking, could we have a more versatile array tool, something like array along path, etc.? Good suggestion. It's not something we have high on the list at the moment, but again, if more ask about it, it will get priority. Quantum is asking, could you explain fill lighting a bit? What to expect feels it has changed since earlier version. We have had a little bit of feedback about changes in fill lighting, and we haven't researched that heavily yet. I suspect it's got to do actually with changes in library data rather than changes in the way Capture behaves. A lot, if not most, of the fixtures in the library have recently been revised with regard to luminous output, and that is something that can greatly affect the way fill lighting behaves in Capture. So fill lighting is the way, it's a fake effect in Capture, basically, that tries to mimic light bouncing around in the room. So when you light fixtures, I'm playing back a snapshot. Let's stop that. So in this scene, for instance, it's quite dark, and when I bring up the yellow park cans, if you look carefully, for instance, at the top of this column here, I'm not sure this comes through very good in the webcast, but maybe it does. You may see that the whole room is slightly illuminated with a yellowish color. And this is the fill lighting effect that is kind of working with averages in lighting in various parts of the room, trying to add a little bit of this indirect lighting bouncing around in the room. It adds to the atmosphere, and it also reduces the contrast a bit, because without the global illumination of light bouncing around, you get a very unrealistic, harsh contrast in the lighting. So as I'm changing colors here, for instance, the fill lighting on the side wall here changes a little bit from red to yellow, and then it turns a bit blue. So it's a very, very discrete effect. I would advise you to turn on a few bright lights and play with the fill lighting slider. So in the view settings, there is a adjustment slider where you can turn the fill lighting on and off. So this is probably the best way to see what kind of effect it adds. But I mean, again, this is in many ways a completely fake effect. We feel the results are good, but the reason we allow you to go in and tweak it like this is that it is in fact not physically accurate to begin with. So final questions, I have 3 here, and that will be it for today. Sebastian is asking, is it possible to export a 2D flat view from objects? That would be great for texturing things, like an unwrap, like something like many 3D drawing programs do. So this is a kind of function that we are probably not going to be adding to Capture. Capture is not a 3D modeling tool in that sense. It's a lighting design software. So we want you to be able to bring all the scenery in, and then we focus on the things you do with the lights rather than the objects. So the answer is no at the moment, and it seems a little bit far-fetched. You could export a Gltf file, for instance, take that into Blender and do what you're looking for. Kyo Production Design LLC is asking, is there a possibility to use objects with textures in PNG and Chroma key? Very popular question the last months when a lot of people are doing virtual events. We have the ability in the material of an object to load an image file, such as a PNG, but Capture does not use the alpha channel. Capture does not use an alpha channel that is coming in from NDI either. So at the moment, there is no way of doing that. It would require a bit of plumbing in the back end. It's actually something that is planned as part of the new material properties that I mentioned before, such as normal maps and shininess maps and things like this. So in the future, but at the moment, no. And the last question for today from Outdream Creative. I didn't know about the region mapping tool. Would it be possible to show it real quick? I think it would be. So let's just drag a box into the design. Let's create a material. Let's drag the material onto the box, and let's use that video that I have coming in NDI and assign a bit of luminance. So here we have the box now playing back the rather boring white line that goes back and forth. It's a test pattern from the NDI tool. Now if I turn this into a wireframe front view and go into material mapping, I can now map or place this material somewhere on the object, but I can only place it by moving it pixel by pixel like this and by using the map to extends feature. So a new functionality that we added was the regions down here, where you can set up a sub portion of the video. So let's grab, let's say, the upper left corner of the video. So let's do from 0, 0, but only half the width, at which point I have to do maths at this rather late hour. I think it's going to be, oh, this is going to go wrong. Let's imagine I want 600 by 400 pixels. Let's call it the new region. Now I can select this region, which is actually just a subpart of the video. So you can see here now that after mapping, if we go to live, that line quickly goes out of view and then only briefly is back again for a moment. So we can define on pixel level a subpart of the video and map only that. So if you have a segmented stream from your media server and you want to map sub-segments to different LED panels, for instance, then mapping regions are your friend. And that would conclude the open Q&A session for tonight. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for all your great questions. And we will be back again in 4 weeks or so with a new live webcast on a new theme. And I look forward to seeing you all soon again. Good evening.